Good morning, everyone. There we go. All right, so I've placed in the chat the link to the presentation. Just to give you a heads up, this is set up in a Wakelet, which is, if you're not familiar with Wakelet, it's a platform that allows like the hold and host links and documents and everything, and it's awesome for presentations. So this is why we set it up. Just to also point out, it's set up in a linear fashion, so you kind of move things up to access everything. But if you are someone who prefers to just sit back and watch, then you can do that as well. There are some interactive pieces, so that's why we would love for you to get on to the presentation. The other thing I want to point out to you is that this presentation will be available to you forever and ever. That's like at least until Wakelet goes away, I guess, which I hope that they don't. It's kind of bad to say. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning. We see that some people are still coming in, which is awesome. So in the meantime, how about we go ahead and have you introduce yourselves? Let us know where you're coming from, something that you do. That would be awesome. Judy, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Yes. Hi, my name is Judy Nguyen. I'm a teaching and learning consultant with AllCovered Education. I was a classroom teacher and ed tech coach, and I'm just Leticia's buddy. And I'm here to help present. I just would like to let you, just give you a warning, I'll gradually disappear in 25 minutes because I have to jump on another call, but it's my pleasure to be here with you today. So thank you so much for joining us.
And you've heard me so far a little bit, but my name is Leticia Citizen. I am an I-4 coach at Hawthorne School in Beverly Hills Unified School District here in Southern California. Let's see, I have been an educator for 22 years, where I've taught 2 years kinder, 7 years first grade, 9 years fifth grade, and this is my 4th year as a coach. And this is what we've been presenting together, Judy, for about 2 years now. It's crazy to say that, right? And then if you notice on the Wakelet, on the presentation, we did include our emails and our Twitter handles. So we love connecting and sharing and learning from all of you. So please don't hesitate to like reach out and just chat with us. We would love to, learn what you did with this information or with other information that you have. So let's go ahead. Yeah, for those of you that are just joining in, let us know where you're coming from, what you do, who you are. We're so happy that you're here in this space with us. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We have like a brief agenda that's here. We're gonna go through, we know that we only have like now 47 minutes. And so we'll go through like the Quilt Codes of the Underground Railroad, some symbol reflections, how to do some drawings and Google Drawings for your quilt. Then we'll kind of briefly go over Tinkercad. Good morning, Brad from Colorado. Then do some creating, in Tinkercad, and then share, and then have a reflection space. Oh, hey, Rachel, I'm an instructional designer at online school. Ooh, oh, we got someone who loves Tinkercad.
Yes, I noticed that.
And
oh, wow.
We are faculty champion. Yo, that's crazy. Love tinkering. So do we. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. So welcome, Cynthia and Rachel and Brad and everyone else that's in this space too.
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and Judy, do you want to give like a little background as to like how we came about this lesson and why we started doing it?
Yeah, so 2 things were happening at once. One, Leticia was asked to present a coding event for middle school age girls, and I am on Twitter. And I was following this artist called, her name is Natrice Gaskin, actually Dr. Natrice Gaskins, and she had posted a lesson. So some of you love Tinkercad, and then on Instructables, teachers are able to post lessons or projects. And so Dr. Gaskins had posted this lesson about using the Underground Railroad, well, using Tinkercad and the idea of quilts and creating quilts and tying that in with the Underground Railroad. And I just thought that was amazing, because a lot of times when I talk about 3D printing or 3D design, it's the other subjects, the humanities are going, how do we use that? You know, is it just for math? And so I really liked that lesson. And so when Leticia reached out, it's like, hey, I have this opportunity to present. Do you have any ideas? I said, well, let me show you this. And so that's how we started with this lesson. So it's all thanks to Dr. Nitrice Gaskins. We've adapted it for the people that we worked with. And as Leticia will talk, you could also tinker it and make it work for the students that you work with too.
Yeah, and at the bottom of this presentation, we also include the link to Dr. Latrice Gaskin's Twitter handle. She's been doing since then, which is like 2 years ago, she's been doing some amazing things. Now she works with the Smithsonian, and she just came out with a book, and she's always sharing her art that she also uses AI to create on her Twitter account as well. So definitely check her out. And we just want to give her a shout out for the amazing work that she's doing with students and just in the art industry, period. So we've linked here a Nearpod, what was I saying? And again, this is, it started at the top and you're going to scroll and we kind of section this off. So the first part is just to get students, right? We want to introduce them to this idea of quilt codes and where it stems from. And so it's set up in a student pace. I will say that if this is something that you want to use with students or with teachers later on, please reach out to me. I don't mind giving you an editable version of this lesson, so that way you could go ahead and tinker it and cater it to your needs and your students' needs. So, we always like to start off just checking in with students about their go-to song and a song that they wish that they never heard before. But this is what, we like to start off with the students first, and just getting them the background information. Right now, many students are familiar with quilts, some are not. We always check in to see who's in this space. But we go ahead and use this quote from Marie Claire Bryant, and there is documentation that shows that supports this idea that during the Underground Railroad for the enslaved people who were escaping, that they would use quilts, and in those quilts there were codes. But then there's also documentation that kind of says that's not really how it happened. Quilts weren't necessarily used, and so there's this back and forth. There's primary sources that support both, but we love to connect it even to present day times where there's the quilting bees who still quilt to this day and who still use codes in there to tell about family history, to tell stories, allows one to use their voices. And so we really want to bring that aspect into the classroom, right? It's a great way to build relationships, build classroom community, and then in hopes that students take this home. I always share the fact that my family has a quilt that was passed on from my family side, or from my dad's side, from Louisiana. And in there, we know the stories used by those codes that are in the quilt. So we have students to go ahead and engage. This is the opportunity for students to really engage with these primary sources. We have them to go ahead and highlight some words. We're going to talk about this. People generally ask us, how long does it take for you to do this entire presentation or this entire lesson with students? Judy and I always say, break it up. Now, for me, I work with TK5 students, and I'm doing this mostly with my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. I like to chunk this over a week's time, maybe about a week and a half. So even this first introduction part, the conversations are so rich, right? Because we're having students to highlight and to identify. We're asking them to share their thoughts on the quilt, right? So we're giving them these spaces, but we're also giving them time to go ahead and talk about these things. So that can generally be from 45 minutes to an hour, maybe, if you're going to break it up. Judy, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think it just if you're focused with social studies, you probably spend a lot more time on the history and, you know, of the Underground Railroad, quilting. And if you're in an art class, you might spend more. So you get to choose what you want to spend your time on. This is just an example of how we did it with the students that we worked with. So it's definitely customizable based on what you're trying to focus on.
But we really want to give students an opportunity to really connect with the past,
Yes.
connected to the present, right? So you'll notice that there was this Padlet that was also set up. There's an article here for students to read that gives them more information about quilt codes and used at that time, how, you know, that's how the enslaved knew where there were safe homes. That's how they knew where they needed to go to next, right? And at the same time, in this article, you know, there's information to go ahead and oppose that idea and say, well, no, this is how they did it more, but this is how we're currently using quilts. It's a, you know, to really get students to go ahead and share what they know, what they believe, and what's going to inspire us. And then we're going to transition that to what we're going to bring into the classroom. Are there any questions so far about any of this? And again, if this is something that you want to use with your students or share with others, please reach out, and we don't mind giving you an editable copy so that way you can go ahead and use as is, or go ahead and use it, like maybe you find more resources to use. And we set it up in a Nearpod. You can definitely set this up any way that you want to. We just like using it that way because then it's one place for us to get all the information from students, and then we can have that data for later. But if you want to use paper pencil, right, and just give them, I love doing that where I'm like making copies of things and giving it to students and letting them actually annotate on the paper and share. So you've got a couple options there. Oh, Cynthia said she's new to Nearpod. Well, Cynthia, you can always reach out to me. I'm here to help you with that. It's really cool. All right.
Aren't you an ambassador, Leticia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Leticia has the credentials, Cynthia. So yeah.
Now we're going to come back to the Wakelet of resources. For those of you that have just joined, the presentation is set up on a Wakelet, and it's set up in, oh, she said she signed up and she's in there. Yeah. It's set up in a linear fashion. So it started from the top, and you're just going to scroll to the next section. So now we're going to talk about how we're setting up a reflection in preparation for quilt symbols. Judy, you want to go ahead and I'll like click while you're talking.
Yeah, so as Leticia mentioned before, really want to connect with the students, with the material, connect it with themselves. We're really into, you know, social emotional learning and just that personal reflection. So one idea that we had, because we're the people we were working with are Google for Education account users, so we thought to use Jamboard. And so as you can see, this is a Jamboard that we forced a copy. So it wasn't a collaborative Jamboard. If you're not familiar with Jamboard, it's an interactive whiteboard that Google hosts. So you'd click on make a copy, and each student had this card to work on. And we wanted them to think about symbols that reflect who they are. So these are the questions that we presented, because we were working with girls who are in middle school who were really interested in a career in STEM. You might choose different questions, but I think the idea is really to ask them about themselves and have them give them this time to reflect on who they are and with the material. So we asked them to think of 4 symbols, something that they represent students, something that they love, something that they want to learn how to do, something that how they want people to remember them by, and what is something that they would like to share with the world one day. And so we gave them time to work on this individually. And when we did this, it was in this format. It was a Zoom format. So it was a virtual lesson. So we had background music playing throughout this time, but this could also be done in face-to-face as well. So Leticia's filling out. These are the answers that you posted, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember them now. For those of you who are not familiar with Jamboard, like Judy said, you'll notice that there are some tools on the left-hand side. And we encourage the girls just to use the sticky note. So, it pops up. And you can change the colors at the top, right? And then they can move. And again, Jamboard is set up so that way you could have 20 boards at one time and everyone can collaborate in that space. But because this is really personal and we wanted to give students, a reflection time, we set it up, as you saw, to force copies. That way individual students got their own. And that was just so that way you didn't have to worry about now. If you are not familiar with Jamboard, or maybe you are, when you put, 20 students in this one space, you get like people deleting this and, oh no, this is my slide, and oh, this is this. And it becomes a mess that you just want to avoid, especially during a reflection time. So I would say there's a time and place to have everyone collaborate at one time. And then it also serves its purpose. That way students can just focus on their own. Now, if you, again, this can definitely be adjusted or modified so that way you don't have to use tech to do this. Maybe you give students Post-its, right? And they're going to write their responses there. And then maybe you have 4 corners of the room where you just have students to go and put up their Post-its. Maybe you just have students write it in the journal, wherever it is, you just want them to be able to document their 4 symbols that they're going to use. And I would say also give them a space to go ahead and share their responses. So if you come back to the Wakelet, again, because we were doing this virtually at the time, we had set up a Wakelet, so it's right underneath. We had set up a sharing space for students to go ahead and make a copy of their Jamboard or take a screenshot. We kind of like walk them through that whole process. And this is what I also do when I'm doing this with my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, where I walk them through the process, the directions are there, and then they can go ahead and share the reflection spaces here. And again, we want to give them that quiet time to go ahead and reflect for themselves. And then we also want to give them space where they can share with each other.
Rachel Miller, was your hand up because yes, I'm a Jamboard user, or did you have a question?
She said yes to Jamboard.
Yes, to Jamboard. And then Brad had asked about, can these tools be used asynchronously? Yes.
Yes. So we actually, this Wakelet, the way that we have it set up, we actually shared this with the first set of girls that we did for the middle school, Girls Can Code. We actually set up this space in that this way specifically because even though it was a 3-hour workshop, we had ran out of time just because, the girls had like lots of questions and they were more interested in our story than actually going through the whole process. And we leaned into that.
Which we obliged.
Yes. Yeah. We were like, hey, why not? So afterwards, we set up this space specifically for them so that way they could go ahead and work on it on their own time. And we included some videos. So we included videos for every step too, just in case, we all like need different modalities in order to, process our learning. So not only did we have the text, but we had the videos as well. The only part was when it came time for them if they wanted to 3D print them, then they had that conversation with their teachers afterwards. Now, we do want to go ahead and set up and say that, like, if you don't have a 3D printer, that's not a necessity. We've learned by doing this from other teachers that, like, if people are Cricut users, then you can print it out that way to create stickers. We've had people who said, they just went on ahead and like printed them out. They found different ways to display them so that way you're not just bound by 3D printing, but that you can adjust it as you see fit. Okay, you are welcome. All right, so again, let's see. Sorry, go ahead.
You were on reflection, and I think the next phase was to actually draw it. So again, we're Google users, and we tinkered with different ideas. I was doing, I always forget the draw.
Auto draw.
Because auto draw, you could export things as PNGs, but it just didn't work really well.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do.
I'll show you what that is. So if you're not familiar with auto draw, you can still see that I have some things here. You can set
Just
it
a
up.
little.
Go ahead.
I'm a cheater, so that's why I like to auto draw because because the AI was going to give me stuff. So I'm like, oh my gosh, let's use auto draw because it'll make my drawings better. But it didn't export things the way that we liked, and it was a little bit limited. Great, auto draw is a great tool if you're not a good artist and you just want to use clip art or anything for your presentations without violating copyright. Great tool, but so
But I had better ideas. I was like,
yes.
so when Judy and I, the whole thing was we wanted to be able to do this as well, right? So we could work alongside the girls, and then even when I'm doing this with students, I'm always creating alongside them. And I was like, Judy, what are you doing? What is this auto draw? No, like, and again, it didn't download as an SVG the way that we needed it to when we import into Tinkercad. So I said, my students and I, we use Google Drawings all the time. And she was like, what? So again, set up the link here. You'll notice that it's very specific. So this link will force you to make a copy. And when you're doing this with students are going to create now those 4 symbols that they've placed on their reflection. And they're going to need to do each symbol on its own drawing board. Okay, so I've had someone recently ask me like, oh, are they going to put all 4 symbols on the one? And I'm like, no, they're going to need to make a copy 4 times. So we've had people ask, or teachers ask, like, well, then how do you manage that? And we've made suggestions like maybe when they label it, they put their first name and they say, symbol 1 and then symbol 2 and symbol 3. You can come up with how best you see fit for your students. But you're doing one drawing on one like platform, if I want to say it, or one space. Canvas, that's what I'm trying to think of. I'm like, what's the word I'm looking for? And so again, when Judy came here, Judy
I cheated again.
Judy was like, oh, let me just go and like upload.
Yes.
You search the web for an image. Let me see. I had a computer.
Yeah.
She like uploaded images and she inserted them. And so she like showed me, and I was like, Judy, no, because again,
I was so proud of myself too.
Because again, the other part of that too is like when you have to download it, it doesn't download very nicely. So I'm like, Judy, let me show you what my students and I do. Because my 5th graders, we were using this all the time. So I told her, I was like, sure, you can like import an image. That way you just have like a visual if you wanted to, but we're actually going to use the drawing tools. Okay, so in Google Drawings, there's actual drawing tools. So we're going to use like the shapes. So you'll notice if you're not familiar with Google Drawings, there's, the toolbar. And so you want to come to where the shapes are, and you're actually going to use these different shapes. You also have the option to use, where is it? The Scribble tool as well. So that way you can just kind of make some scribbles, right? So that's an option. But what we're going to really focus on is on the shapes. I do want to make this disclaimer that the first time that you have students use this, don't let it be for this activity or for this lesson, right? Maybe you're just giving them time to practice, or maybe you're doing another, lower order thinking activity with them, and you just want them to go ahead and practice on or do something on Google Drawings. Have them that be their first time using it. Just because again, you have so many parts to this lesson that you want to really manage your time right, and it lessens the frustration level for students. Because you get students who are like, I don't know. And I'm going to say this, not every student loves this, but every student will give it a try. If you've set up that space for students to go ahead, and again, I'm drawing with them. I love having students to come up and like share like their best practices and how they figured it out. Judy, do you want to say, Rachel had a question. Do we let the students use the Scribble tool and Tinkercad at all for this lesson?
That is an option. I think we played with that. There's Scribble Tool is a really good tool, but I think we'd like the preciseness that the Google Drawings has. The fact that I think you have a little bit more control, at least in my experience, a little bit more control in when I'm drawing in Google Drawings, but definitely that doesn't mean that don't use the Scribble Tool. We just found it to be a little bit easier to lead that lesson using drawings. But yeah, play with the Scribble Tool, see if that works better.
Especially for our students who struggle with that 3D aspect.
Yeah.
We found that this was, again, a lot easier. Like at my school, we have touch screens, so that allowed for my students as well, who struggled with the mouse or who struggled with the pad. We just, we wanted to give students options. So again, if you find that it's a lot easier or it's a smoother transition for students to go ahead and just draw directly into Tinkercad, please, by all means, like, do what you feel is best for your students. We're just showing you our process of how we did it. And so we want to be able to give people a lot of options as well. But thank you for that, Rachel. So you'll notice that the first thing we have to do is go ahead and use the square shape. And so we want to use that to provide a border for your platform. You can go ahead and just make it transparent. Because we don't need the color there, we don't need it filled in. We actually just need the border of everything to place over into Tinkercad. The other thing too is I point out to students to really make the lines thick. So, I tell them to toggle anywhere between 3 point to 4 points, right? And so we always want to just have that border. And so now, again, I have like my border to start off with, and now I'm going to use some shapes. So my first one, I think, was a computer, and I'm actually going to make a laptop instead. So I'm going to make my screen. The other thing that we like to point out is that as students are drawing, to make sure to say to them, like, hey, you want all your pieces to touch, and you want all your pieces as you're drawing to touch the border. Oh yeah, that's right. Judy had to step out. She has another meeting. And so we're, I have my screen, and then what's really cool is then I can copy and paste. So, if you want to, go ahead and come and draw. The other thing I want to point out is that we specifically made the platform or our canvas 2x2. So that way, when we transport it over into Tinkercad, right, we have the sizes already set, and it allows for students to make a 4x4 quilt with all 4 symbols. Okay, so we're just going through, and here I'm gonna now start making my keyboard. Make that transparent, and again, I'm making my lines so that way they're always 3 points, right? And so this is always the fun part for me, and just giving students time to do this. And now I can make several copies at a time, right? On my laptop. Are there any questions in the meantime? So students are going to do this 4 times because they're going to do it for every symbol that they've chosen to do. So they've chosen on their reflection. I don't always get these to be perfect. Okay. So now, let's see. So usually when I did this with students, I have it. I actually do make it so that way it's all evened out. Takes a little time. So this, in my experience with my students, I do this drawing part is its own, like it's like the next day, right? So we spend about like 30 to 40 minutes. And again, I've already like prepped them using this tool. If you have other tools that seem to work better, I know that Rachel threw out like using the Scribble tool in Tinkercad. If you prefer to use auto draw, we just find that we were looking for the tool that was going to be best for when it's time for us to transfer or import the file over into Tinkercad. So after you've had students like draw all four symbols on Google Drawings, we're going to come back here. And again, we've included videos as well, just in case if you forget to, if you prefer like video demonstration as opposed to text. We're going to download now each of the drawings. Now, I do want to point out that when you come to download, there is an SVG file option. However, we found that when we downloaded the files in SVG form, there was no rhyme or reason where the image did not come out the way that we needed it to. Sometimes the negative and positive space was off. So that way when we transferred it over into Tinkercad, it like made a mess instead. So the best thing that we found, and I know it's an extra step, is that we just downloaded all the files as a PNG file. Okay, so again, yes, we know that in Google Drawings, there's an SVG option, but it didn't always download with keeping the file or the drawing as we needed it to in terms of like the negative and positive spacing. Like the spaces that we needed to be negative were like filled in, and then some other spaces were not. It was very wonky. So there was no rhyme or reason that we could find. Now, if you have a different suggestion, we are open to that. But we just found that the easier way to go about it, so that way, you're not having so many students say this didn't work or this didn't work. We just added an extra step, download it as a PNG. Okay. Maybe Cynthia, we would have to like check that out. And then what we did is that we found online Conversio. Now, Conversio is free, and what's nice about it is that students could go ahead and convert all four of their images without having to pay. On Conversio, if you have another tool that works, we're open to that too. We love to like give people options. The link that we have here on the Wakelet is set up so that way, we made it really easy for students. They don't have to go and search, to make sure that it says PNG to SVG. We've already included that link. So once students click on that link, you'll see that it's already set up from PNG to SVG. They're going to go ahead and choose their files, right? This is where it's important to, again, to know, make sure that students have labeled their files so that they know what their different files that they're going to use are. The other thing too is like if you are Chromebook users, like we are at my school, just having students understand where their files go so that way they can find them later is always tricky, but students get used to it after a while, right? So here's the one that I made earlier just to use as an example. What's nice is that students can upload all four at one time, right? And then once they have their four symbols here, they're just going to go ahead and click convert. And again, they want to make sure that they know where the files are. Just to let you know too, there are some like small Chrome ads that might pop up, but we haven't found anything that's inappropriate for students. So once they've got their files, they're going to go ahead and download them. Again, you want to make sure that students know where those files go, right? So I have it here. And now we're going to come back to our Wakelet, right? And now we're going to move into designing their quilt. So they've reflected on their four symbols, they've drawn their four symbols, they've downloaded them as PNGs, converted those to SVGs, and now we're going to upload those SVG files into Tinkercad. Now, I know some of you earlier right away shared your experience with Tinkercad. We have someone who said that they love using it. But for the rest of you, if you want to go ahead, we'd love to check in. What's your familiarity with Tinkercad? So are you like Tinker what? Never heard of it. You've heard of it, but never used it. Maybe you've used it a couple of times. That would be a 3. Or if you use it often, 4. If you want to go ahead and share in the chat. Your familiarity with Tinkercad. Ooh, new to you. Welcome. 1, 4. Ooh. Yeah, Rachel was the one who said that she loved. Jason said Tinker what? Oh, someone's already testing it. All right, so got a lot of newbies. All right, so let me just start off by saying, because as educators, we love to hear the word free. Tinkercad is free. Free for you and free for your students. So we're gonna go ahead and click on this link. Just to point out that when you sign up, so I'm gonna go ahead and sign in. Okay, I was like, why is it not recognizing me? So you have several options on how you're going to sign up. What's nice that if you do work with younger students, or maybe you just want to set up your own class, you can do this in 2 ways. Okay, so you'll see looking at my space that once I logged in, right, we have classes, gallery, blog, learn, and teach. What's really cool is for you, if you are new, to really check out the teach and the learn spaces. And the teach, there are lesson plans that are there, not only for you to use, but for your students as well. So I would say, you know, in that free time that we all have, right? Go ahead and like tinker in some of these lessons, really helping walk through. Again, if you have time with your students, I would suggest, again, just like I said, for Google Drawings, do not let this be the first time for this lesson that students are using Tinkercad. Just because, especially for our students who struggle with spatial sense, but just giving students, you know, time to tinker in this space, and you'll see why, you know, it's set up in a 3D type way. Just giving students an opportunity to play around with it. I love just having students to go ahead and log in and just click on all the buttons. I tell them click on everything. If it explodes, you know, not to click that button again. It's that simple, right? So you've got this teach option with lesson plans, and then under the learn, there's also some extra lessons, some starters, some projects that you can set up for students to access as well. Now, if you are someone who likes to set up your classes for your students, there are 2 ways that you can do it. One way is that you can use, and I'm not going to go through that process, but you can use Google Classroom. So if you are someone like myself, with my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, we use Google Classroom. You can go ahead and pull that information from Google Classroom, and it creates your classes right into Tinkercad. Great way to do it. However, I will say that if you pull from Google Classroom, as students are working on their projects, or as students finish their projects, you will have to then, you know, maybe leverage Google Classroom for students to share the link to their projects for you to access them. Okay. I like to see my students do it in real time, and I like to be able to just click on their accounts to see what they're doing. So what I do instead is I use the other option. The second option is for me to go ahead and create, and I know it's a little bit more time, is for me to go ahead and create their accounts. So I would have to set up their username and their passwords, and I usually, you know, set up something generic for them to access. But what I love about that option of me setting up their accounts is that now I can see what they're working on in real time. I can see that when they finish a project, you know, I can just go into my class, I can see what projects they're working on, click on that, see where they are, see what they finish, and I don't have to wait for them to go ahead and share it with me on Google Classroom and then click on that link and then go into that space. So again, you've got 2 options of how you can do that. Find what works best for you and your students, and that way you can go ahead and set up those classes. Also, I have my own space where I'm creating. So let's go back And I want to show you so you can see here, but I'll show you some final designs in a minute. But what I'm going to do is, and all your students, right, they're going to create a new design. This is when they are going to import their SVG files that they created on Conversio after they downloaded their PNG from Google Drawings. So they're going to click on import. Okay, it's going to ask them to choose a file. And students might be like, hey, I'm clicking on my file, but it won't come up. Remember to point out that, hey, the only one that's lit up is an SVG because that's the only type of file that can be imported into Tinkercad. Right? You'll notice that right away it creates dimensions for you. However, as we instruct here back on the Wakelet, we want the squares to be 40 by 40. And we suggest that size because we're having students create a 4 by 4 quilt. So the directions are for them, all right, go ahead and create your 4 by 4 quilt. It should include all 4 symbols that you created, but how you want to convey your story, how you want to convey the message about you is up to you. So, how many times you decide to duplicate that image or that symbol is up to you, but you at least need each of the 4 symbols at least one time in your quilt, if that makes sense. Right, so we're gonna go ahead and change it to 40 by 40. Now let's say that they import all 4 symbols and they forget, oh my gosh, Miss Citizen, I forgot to resize it. No worries. If they go ahead and click on their file, you'll see right away that the dimensions pop up. They can either go to the corner and move them and they'll see the numbers pop up, or they can actually go over to the number and change it there. So they've got some other ways to go ahead and make sure that it's 40 by 40. I need to change this one. And it'll be resized. When you import the files, they'll come up different colors. The colors don't matter at the moment because if you do go ahead and print them on the 3D printer, right, it's going to come out to the color of the filament. If you are going to use a Cricut instead, then again, you get to change the color. So you can click on it and you'll notice that the menu comes up, so I can change the color there. But for our purposes, so when we did it in 3D printing, we told the students don't worry about the color of what is coming out because that's what the filament's going to match up. Also, we found that people said if they have not the 3D printing, but what is that, the metal one? I can't think of the name of it now. The other printing that you can do, you can also use this, the laser, I think that's the 3D laser printing. You can also use these files there, right? So students are going to bring this, bring in the 4 symbols. To make a duplicate, they would just click on the image, press Control-C, and then make a copy. Right, so now, and then if you are going to 3D print them, you want to talk to students about making sure that their symbols are close touching, right? Because otherwise when you go to print, it could be a hot mess and then they'll have to start again. For those of you that said that you were new to Tinkercad as well, you'll see right now that my work plane is at a slant, right? If you come over to the left-hand side, I can change my view. So I can change my view to top view. I can change it so that way it's to the front, right? I can even go to the bottom to see from there. So I can play around with this. Students usually will fix it to what they see fit, what works best for them. The other thing that if you are going to 3D print, we make sure to tell our students to make sure that their files are flat on the plane. Otherwise, if you have them off when it's time to print, again, it's going to be kind of wonky and it's going to print weird. So keep that in mind. I like to create from the top and then I start moving it around to make sure that all my pieces are together. So I wanted to show you a final one that I finally made. And I know we're down to, oh yeah, go ahead, Jason. you have a question?
Yeah, I know when you initially said when Judy tried to put the computer image on there,
Mhm.
would that show up the same as the if you on this now? It wouldn't show up in the 3D format.
No, when she tried to do the image, right, to bring it on there instead of like drawing it out herself, it didn't, when we downloaded it to transfer from a, what was it, a PNG to an SVG, it, again, it was very wonky with the negative and positive space. It
Oh,
really,
okay.
yeah. Now I
Because I was
will
wondering.
say that maybe if you find some images that are more outlined and don't have like all the color inside,
Right.
that could possibly work because you really want that, that outline of all the parts or all the pieces in that drawing.
Okay. Okay. I was wondering because I may not be able to do a drawing template as well as this one.
Oh, please. So let me just start off by saying, like, this took me a long time to get to this point.
Okay.
So that's why I always say when the kids are drawing, I'm drawing too. Like whatever they're creating, I'm creating, just so I can get better at it, just so I know when there are things that come up, like I can possibly help troubleshoot. That's how I got to this point. So please, no one feel intimidated, like, oh my gosh, I can't. Like, and
Okay.
I bring in pictures too, so I can just see. You saw me, I like put it on the side, right, in the gray area, just so I can see, and I play around with stuff. So
Right. Okay.
I take more time than the kids do. Like they come over and they're like, what are you doing? Why didn't you just try it this way? So be
Okay.
vulnerable. Be vulnerable.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. I like Noun Project. Yes, Noun Project is another one. Ooh, I didn't even think about that. Exported as a SVG, right? But it bypasses the drawing part. But even bringing Noun Project icons in on the side to use as a reference would be really good too, Rachel. So yes, Rachel came up. I love the Noun Project because they do give you images that are drawn with the outline, which really helps for the visual. Oh, I do free, but yes, Rachel said it's $20, discount $20 per year. I use the free version, but hey, do you get like more, you get access to more things, Rachel, if you pay? You get everything.
And you don't have to you don't have to do the attribution that they want you to do with the free version. So
Okay.
honestly, it's like the best $20 I ever I spend every year. It's super worth it, but that's a personal choice.
Okay. No. I'm all about like getting all the bells and whistles sometimes. So thank you for that. I never even knew that they had a paid version. So, oh my God, we only have 2 minutes. Okay, so here's a final, I just wanted you to see, here's a final one. Again, the colors that are here were just random as I like imported the files. So again, if you are 3D printing them, it doesn't really matter because the filament is going to be there. If you are going to print them instead, then maybe that's where the colors will come into play. Some extensions that you can do with this is then having students to do a remix together. So there is a way for students to share their file, to collaborate. This was another step that I love doing with students, so that way they can come together and they can remix, bring in their symbols with students to remix the story. Some of them like to write poetry, allowing them to write song. This is great. Dr. Gaskins talks about doing a cipher with students, right? You can also do this so that way students choose like one symbol and then you create a class story out of this. And that's where the extension comes in, where you're having students to write and put sound or maybe words, or if they want to do a play or whatever, that they can do that together. So that's here for you to see. And then always allowing students, again, a space for them to share their creations. So because we were doing this virtually, I had set up a collaborative Google slide. And so students went on and could share an image of their creations and then be able to comment on each other's. So there's tons of Tinkercad resources here that are free. What else? There's additional resources on the Underground Railroad, some videos that we found. And then again, check out Dr. Natrice Gaskin. She's amazing. And she's doing some amazing work with folks. And so that is there. And then we also have a playlist that we created with our students. So thank you for coming to this space. Thank you for all of your questions. Thank you for being so engaged. I really appreciate all of this. This was so much fun. If you have any questions for us, I know our time is up, but you can definitely find us here. Our emails are here. You can find us on Twitter. You're so welcome, Jason. Thank you, Rachel and Cynthia and Tammy and Amanda and Cindy and Samia. Hope I pronounced your name correctly. And thank you, Brad, for
Thank you all. This was so wonderful. I hate to do it. I'm going to kill the session so that the next group can come in and use this room. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.